I'm a power person. I enjoy power.
I dug the hole as big as I could. I pushed him in it.
That's for you. I killed 33 times. You're only gonna kill me once.
Please subscribe to our channel and turn on bell icon to watch more real true crimes around the world. John Wayne Gacy was a friendly man who loved to entertain young children. He frequently dressed up as his alter ego, Pogo the Clown, at parties that he hosted for his entire neighborhood. By 1978, public perception of Gacy would change forever, and he would earn the ominous nickname of the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois, on the 17th of March, 1942. The second of three children, Gacy had a difficult upbringing. His father was an alcoholic who was reportedly both mentally and physically abusive to his children and their mother. His father spent apparently all of Gacy's childhood demeaning him and physically punishing him and telling him how stupid and worthless and effeminate he was. He would even deprive his son of food, which would lead Gacy to resorting to eating at his friend's house. Gacy was a sickly child. He suffered from a heart condition limiting his involvement in sports activities and consequently alienating him from his peers aged 11. An accident in a playground led to his teenage years being blighted by blackouts and hospital visits. By 1966, a 24-year-old Gacy was married and had relocated to the city of Waterloo, 300 miles west of Chicago in the neighboring state of Iowa. There is where things would seem to have turned for the better for him. He had a good job, fell in love, and the woman he married had 2 kids by him, and their life seemed to be going all right. Gacy wasn't just a regular family man, he was also quite active in the local Chamber of Commerce, and he played quite an active role, and he was a real figure in the local community. Gacy had started to build the perfect life for himself, but he was concealing a dark secret. He developed an unhealthy sexual interest in young boys. He developed an interest in one particular local boy. Gacy would lure the boy back to his home and sex him, but this boy wouldn't let this go quietly and told his father, who in turn told the police. Gacy would attempt to intimidate the boy, but he would still testify. But due to the lack of evidence, he would only be tried for sodomy and plead guilty, thinking he would get off easy. But the judge was having none of it and sentenced him to 10 years. Gacy was quite the smooth talker and would end up convincing the parole board and people that he was actually a good guy and is completely reformed and would only serve 18 months of his 10-year sentence. In June 1970, he would be out at the age of 28. By the time he was released, Gacy was divorced and decided to move to Chicago for a fresh start. In Chicago, Gacy founded a successful construction business, attended church, remarried, and volunteered as the Democratic precinct captain in his area. During this time, he threw elaborate block parties and built a solid reputation in his community. Gacy was respected and admired by friends, neighbors, and police officers. And more importantly, no one in Chicago knew about what happened with Gacy when he was away at Iowa. He got married again by 1972 and would settle down with his new wife at a house in the suburbs that would become the site of something unseen by the area before or since. Gacy was active in his local community and helpful towards his neighbors. He willingly loaned his construction tools and plowed snow from neighborhood walks free of charge. From 1974 to 1978, he hosted themed annual summer parties. These events were attended by up to 400 people, including politicians and business associates. In 1973, Gacy and a teenage employee traveled to Florida to view a property Gacy had purchased. While there, Gacy kept the employee in their hotel room. After returning to Chicago, this employee drove to Gacy's house and beat him in his front yard. Gacy told his wife he had been attacked for refusing to pay him for poor quality painting work. In December 1978, 10 miles from Gacy's house, 15-year-old Des Plaines resident Rob Piste was reported missing by his mother. He was a good kid to his parents and a great student in school. At the time of his disappearance, Rob was working at a pharmacy in Des Plaines, and he had told an employee, and actually his mother, that he was going to go talk to a contractor about a job, and he then went out the back door and he wasn't seen any time thereafter. Rob seemed to have just vanished off the face of the earth. Much of PDM's workforce consisted of high school students and young men. Gacy would often proposition his workers for sex or insist on sexual favors in return for lending his vehicles, financial assistance, or promotions. Using these connections, the police would look into Gacy and find his past criminal history, where he was convicted of sodomy. And using that and the fact that Rob was looking for a job in construction with Gacy's company and eyewitnesses, placing Gacy at the parking lot behind the pharmacy where Rob went missing, they have enough to get a warrant to search Gacy's home. On the 13th of December 1978, police conducted their first search of Gacy's home, finding a number of suspicious items. They recovered various items of pornography, some books that were titled "Pretty Boys Must Die." They also recovered driver's licenses of other young people, and when they ran a check on those driver's licenses, it was determined that those kids were also reported missing. Another item recovered was a high school ring which had belonged to missing 19-year-old John Sheck, last seen in January 1977. Further investigation discovered that 2 of Gacy's employees had been reported missing 17-year-old John Bukovich, last seen in July 1975, and Gregory Godzig, also 17 years old, missing since December 1976. But there was no other evidence or dead bodies found, so they couldn't make an arrest at the time.
I went out to the garage, I dug the hole as big as I could, I pushed him in it, and then I cemented it over.
That's when the police decided to commit to surveilling Gacy wherever he would go. But Gacy knew what was up and would even come up to the police cars tailing him and have nice conversations with them. He would even buy them beers if they end up following him into his private club. This act of confidence is all a ploy to try and persuade the police that he was not the type of person that would engage in any sort of murder because he was a serious businessman. The police would interview everyone he was connected with, and it seems like everyone he knew loved him. His co-workers, neighbors, friends, basically anyone who came into contact with him would end up liking him, and the police were also not an exception, and they would also develop the same feelings towards him. Through his membership in a local moose club, Gacy became aware of a Jolly Joker clown club, whose members regularly performed at fundraising events and parades, in addition to voluntarily entertaining hospitalized children. In late 1975, Gacy joined the clown club and created his own characters Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, devising his own makeup and costumes. He described Pogo as a happy clown, whereas Patches was a more serious character. Gacy seldom earned money for his performances, and later said that acting as a clown allowed him to regress into childhood.
It's almost like the feeling you get out of coming out of church on Christmas Eve.
He performed as both Pogo and Patches at numerous local parties, political functions, charitable events, and children's hospitals. The police would continue to track him until one day they get reports from Gacy's employees that from time to time he would make them dig ditches under his house. And while they were down there, they would smell foul odors coming from the crawl space of Gacy's house. And that would lead the detectives to look for a second warrant to go back and search the house. And soon they would see Gacy race over to his lawyer's office, and the same lawyers would call over the police, and in a panic, they would tell them to not let Gacy get away, and it would become clear that he had told his lawyers about something shocking. The police continued to follow his car away from the offices and eventually arrest him for drugs that he attempted to get rid of at a gas station. Gacy would get arrested for marijuana possession and delivery, but things would only go downhill for Gacy after that. The police had obtained the second warrant they'd been so desperate for on the 21st of December 1978. They searched Gacy's home on West Summerdale Avenue for the second time.
Search warrant, they went in the crawl space, and the very first shovel that they dug, they found human remains.
In that crawl space, the police would discover shocking scenes and would arrest Gacy for murder. He now wants to confess and draws a map for the police of where to find all the bodies, and they would end up unearthing 27 dead bodies inside of his house. Gacy's victims were typically strangled or suffocated to death. He would then dispose of their bodies by burying them beneath his house or discarding them in nearby rivers. The exact number of Gacy's victims is a matter of debate. Gacy himself confessed to killing 33 young men, most of whom were buried in the crawl space beneath his house. However, some remains were also found in nearby rivers. The true extent of his crimes may never be known, as some victims remain unidentified to this day. It is believed that Gacy's killing spree began in 1972 and continued until his arrest in 1978. One of the most chilling aspects of Gacy's case was his alter ego as Pogo the Clown. Gacy would entertain children as a clown at various events, parades, and charitable functions. He used this persona to gain access to potential victims and to manipulate their trust. This disturbing duality between his public image as a friendly clown and his private life as a sadistic killer added an element of horror to Gacy's crimes and contributed to the shock and revulsion felt by the public. John Wayne, Gacy's trial began in February 1980, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution presented a harrowing narrative of Gacy's crimes, detailing the horrific acts committed against his victims. Furthermore, the defense attempted to argue that Gacy was mentally ill, but this defense strategy failed to convince the jury. On March 13, 1980, Gacy was found guilty of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to death. Understanding the psychological profile of John Wayne Gacy is a complex task. Gacy exhibited several traits commonly associated with psychopathy, such as a lack of empathy, superficial charm, and manipulative behavior. He also displayed signs of sadism, deriving pleasure from the suffering of his victims.
For you. I killed 33 times. You're only going to kill me once.
After his conviction, John Wayne Gacy spent 14 years on death row. On May 10, 1994, he was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. Gacy's final words before his execution were, "Kiss my ass." His execution brought closure to the victims' families and marked the end of a chapter of terror in American criminal history. Thank you for watching this video. Like and subscribe for more videos. See you in the next one.